to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Those Who Remain. I played it on the Xbox One. It's also available on the PS4, PC, Nintendo Switch, pretty much everything. So let's start with the story. You play as a man named Edward who is heading towards a town called Dermont. You were originally going to meet your friend Diane there. She's not around. Pretty much the town is deserted, and you find out that there was a young girl who was murdered, and there's some weird stuff going on with all of that, and you get wrapped up in the investigation of that. There's this weird, creepy fact that pretty much no one is there in the town, as well as there are these weird, creepy shadow people all around, and if you get anywhere near them, they will murder you. There's also some weird, creepy, satanic stuff going on, and I'm throwing around the word creepy a lot because it's meant to be scary. And I gotta say, I was enjoying the story until the end, and I just despised the ending. And then I looked into it, and I found out that really, man, the endings of this game, because it's a game with multiple endings, it just falls apart pretty much for me no matter what. And I am actually going to do a spoiler talk and get into that in more detail there. Obviously, review, no spoilers. As for the audio in this game, the first thing I noticed was it's horribly mixed. During the opening cutscene, I could hear what my character was saying just fine. I had no problems, but then later in the game, with the volume, the in-game volume, at the same level, I could barely hear him. It was as if he was whispering like this the entire time, versus my normal talking voice. It was really annoying because then I had to crank up the volume, which was problematic because then when loud, scary noises went on, they were just really way too loud, and they actually were horrible to hear because they kind of hurt my ears because it was so loud at that point. As for Edward's voice acting, it's pretty well shit, and so is, all the voice acting in this game. I mean, it's admittedly not the worst I've ever heard, but it is not good. There are also other issues with sound effects, like when you pick up objects and move them, throw them, drop them, whatever. Sometimes there's sound effects, sometimes there's not. There's just this weird thing with that. I will say overall I think the music did a good job in adding to the creepy, horror game atmosphere. As for the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, like I was saying, this is a horror game. It's a first-person horror game, and it starts to delve into the run, hide, or die way too much for my taste. But mostly, it's a lot of wandering around levels, solving very easy and, quite frankly, incredibly tedious puzzles. And that really is pretty much the majority of the game, except for the every now and then when enemies pop up and force you into the run, hide, or die situations, which that honestly drags down the game for the most part. I don't think it benefits the storytelling of this game. I don't think it benefits the overall experience, quite frankly, not to draw comparisons to other games, but I kind of have to here. I feel like had they done what Soma did, where they introduced a mode where you don't have to worry about enemies and you just get to kind of piece together this creepy, weird story, I think that would have done wonders for this game, and it would have eliminated some of the shittier mechanics. And when it comes to the run, hide, or die situation, let's talk about checkpoints, because if you get murdered, which will probably happen, you lose all your progress for that situation, which could be based around a puzzle. For me, I had collected and placed 5 out of 6 puzzle pieces and then got murdered by an enemy I couldn't see because also those puzzle pieces took up like 50% of your screen. I mean, there are actually a couple of times where I think the run, hide, or die mechanics kind of work for making it scarier, but for the most part, there are these weird monsters at times that will chase you and just make completing the puzzle unneededly difficult. Not because the puzzle itself is difficult, but because you have to worry about this randomly moving creature that could pop up while you're staring at a sheet of paper or picking an item up and murder you. Let's get into the controls, and they're shit. They're trash. The movement, not so much, but you have to use the camera because it's a first-person game, and that is also how you control your reticle to point at and interact with objects, and it's garbage. It starts out way too sluggish to be of any use, so if you crank it up, then it becomes too jittery to be of any real use. it doesn't work well and it slows things down. I also found that the control buttons aren't always as responsive as you'd like when you're interacting with things. Maybe that's more in the design element, that the interacting area that you aim at with your reticle is too small, but it's frustrating when you're being rushed because you're under attack and you can't interact with an object that you need to. The precision's not there, the responsiveness is not there, it just doesn't work well. Also, in the menus, for some reason there's this weird lag and it will double read a single input. You'll be trying to select something and you'll tap down and it won't move, and then suddenly it'll skip down 2 spaces. That doesn't work, and that's stupid because it's a fucking menu. Let's get into the graphics, which I'm going to give you my positives first. One of the creatures has a really creepy design and I like it, as well as I guess the shadow people have a creepy design and I like it. All the other things look like shit in this game. It's an ugly, ugly game. There are certain objects that have textures and then there are plenty of objects that do not. And man, for a first-person game, anytime you see your character's hands, man, they don't look like real hands. It takes you out of it because they just look so weird, like this person had never actually seen human hands before and only had been vaguely described them and how they move. And it is unfortunate because, like I said, there are a couple of really good creepy monsters and there are some great visuals. The way the town is designed, I really like the emptiness, the darkness of it. I think that all works, and the lighting and the creatures disappearing when you turn on lights. I like stuff like that. I love it visually, and I think that worked in building a creepy world. But the differences in textures in some objects and others, and how horrible certain things look and others not so horrible, not great. It just strips away from it. I just wish there was more consistency there. I think that would have benefited the game overall. Also, the game runs poorly. Like, not the worst I've seen, but it definitely stutters, and when it stutters, it's not really, really bad, but it is noticeable, and it gets really unpleasant to look at when you're running around and sprinting in areas. It's unpleasant to see. So let's just get into this. While it had an interesting story to begin with, it just falls apart, especially once you get that first ending, because you're probably not going to get the good ending unless you look up in advance what you're looking for. Because yes, there's a good ending, there's a bad ending, and then there's the complete shit, like, horrible ending. And the thing is, it just doesn't necessarily make sense with the story and a lot of the things you're reading and finding out about what was going on in this town. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. But then you've got the tedium of all these really awful puzzles. They're not even puzzles. It's more like, go find this object, put it here. And it's do that repeatedly. And it's not even, like I said, it's not hard, it's just tedious. You've got the atrocious checkpoints, you've got the unnecessary run, hide, or die elements, and they really do feel unnecessary. Eventually, playing the game just felt like a chore. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it, is it felt like a chore. It just was unpleasant to go through. I wish I didn't have to for this. I would love to go back in time and get my $20 back and my time back. The best thing I could say wrapping this up is that this isn't the worst game I have played this year. And I do hate to see these things fall apart in this game, the gameplay, the story, and whatnot, because I think they built a generally creepy atmosphere. You do feel really alone, and you do feel like this sense of danger with all these shadow people around watching you and stuff. You feel like you're under a microscope. So if you couldn't guess where I'm ending this, it's that this game is not recommended. I cannot recommend this. I will not recommend this. Just don't. And again, because I've said this before, I always hate doing that with indie games, but man, I've played some better indie horror games than this. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, what genre of games do you feel is the hardest to make a really good game out of? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.